discussion on the side effect of removing her ovaries. She then had significant grief of never having had children, and that was really impacting her recovery, not only the symptoms of menopause, but also impacting her grief process. She, of course, she experienced depression and very painful intercourse, which just added on to everything with menopause symptoms. So again, how this treatment would then not only hopefully help her pain, but what comes next. So unfortunately, Jean's experience is very common in the US, and it sounds like worldwide this is an issue. But we know that from the SWAN study, very important study, the study of women across the nation here in the US, looking at different socioeconomic groups of cultural background. The study has been going on for over 15, 20 years, studying women. It's an observational study. So a recent publication in 2015 showed that the symptoms last with a median of 7.4 years, but vasomotor symptoms can last up to a median of 10.6 years in women of color, but 80% of women experience moderate to severe vasomotor symptoms. One of the biggest problems is that in the US, is that residents are not trained. So I was a part of this study led by Dr. Kling at the Mayo Clinic, and we surveyed 733 surveys were sent out, 200 surveys came back. But what we understood is that while they could answer about 50% of the questions correctly about adequate treatment of menopause, only 50% had any lectures about menopause in their residencies, and only 6.8% felt comfortable taking care of women in menopause as they went into practice after residency, which is, of course, just a terrible statistic. The limitations in treatment of women with menopause, which again, 80% of women suffer symptoms. In the US alone, there are 78 million women in menopause, 6,000 a day go into menopause naturally, and of course, after cancer treatment or treatment of endometriosis. But the limitation, of course, is that us providers are not well trained in menopause, and we have limited time. In the US, the average time of a visit of a woman in a clinic is about 10 minutes. And so there's not time to get into these very complicated consequences of treatment. And women are often suffering in silence. They're not bringing up these symptoms. And providers think, well, if the patient didn't bring it up, then it must not be a problem. Also, many providers are not aware of safe treatments, and how the WHI study was communicated in 2003 has left a lot of providers with misinformation, which just compounds the fear of hormone replacement therapy. So we have a lot of challenges. So of course, there are real life symptoms of menopause. There, of course, is a significant increase in depressive and anxiety symptoms, so mood disturbance. Vasomotor symptoms we've talked about are significant. Bladder urgency, bladder leaking, and we think about then, of course, decreased libido and pain with intercourse, and then sleeplessness and sleep disturbance. So these are very common real life symptoms. And of course, the metabolic consequences are significant. We know, for example, a woman with menopause before 45, her risk of premature heart attack is very significant, often brought 20 years earlier than at spontaneous menopause at 52. Osteoporosis, I very much respect the lecture of my colleague about osteoporosis, but very significant when there is loss of estrogen, especially prematurely. And especially if the same woman experienced or received the birth control pills early in adolescence, she never established a good bone mass by age 32, and now she has premature menopause. Her risk of significant osteoporosis is significant. We worry about the biomarkers and the metabolic consequences that could lead to early dementia that happen with early menopause, as well as diabetes and central obesity, which we know just exacerbates the inflammatory background that was part of endometriosis in the first place. We then look at the practical consequences of menopause. I think this is very fascinating that in the UK, there is laws that are actually being advanced right now regarding the Equality Act of 2010, that menopause discrimination is covered under the under discrimination acts, but it's very difficult for women to litigate and have their voice heard, let's say if they're discriminated against because of menopause symptoms. Bloomberg magazine just realized that, or just published this, is that many women are leaving the workplace during menopause because of loss of productivity, absenteeism, presenteeism, with significant loss of sleep and all the consequences. The cost of business is a very interesting study in 2014 that showed that there are more outpatient visits, ER visits, and more cost for women who are insured, but yet have vasomotor symptoms. So there's significant cost of business and to women's productivity with untreated menopause symptoms. So what do patients deserve? They deserve a direct-to-consumer approach. Often we treat menopause as, again, a very medical condition that is not well discussed. And I believe, just as my esteemed colleague talks about an app for adolescent endometriosis, we need more and more consumer approaches that are easy to use to identify and serve women with menopause symptoms. I really believe we need to approach aging as a financial plan. If you go to a financial planner and say, I want to retire with $1 million, we think about what does a woman save, what are her habits. We need to think about aging in the same way, offering personalized goal setting to our patients, as well as risk stratification and gap analysis. And I'll get more into that. We look at risk reduction. If we think about what a woman wants, we can use that to harness her lifestyle habits, her treatment plan based on what she wants for her healthy aging. And then we look at educational tools. And so when I think about wellness, I really looked at wellness as a comprehensive, process. And to think about this, I like to create lists, as we all do, and to help a woman think about her aging in these 9 areas of wellness. And my research and study and treatment has used these 9 areas of wellness to help structure aging for an individual woman. I performed a pilot study in 2008 and completed or offered 5 visits to women over 6 months. We had 83 women who completed these visits. And after going through a structured program of personalized goal setting and personalized risk stratification and risk reduction, we saw that there was a generalized improvement of self-reported menopause symptoms. So if women had some structured education and structured questioning, she then reported improvement in symptoms, even if all she did was improve her physical activity. These women, just by tracking the symptoms and having awareness of symptoms, she was able to increase her or reduce her risk factor for heart disease in the sense of we had an average loss of waist circumference of 2.5 inches. And over 75% of women stayed in the program because they were so grateful for being seen, for being heard, and being acknowledged in terms of their suffering of these symptoms. And I was able to publish this study in the journal Menopause, which is a journal of the North American Menopause Society. Jean's progress. So I've been able to take care of Jean over time. We developed her picture of self, or her goal, with conversation and self-reflection. And in terms of activity, her goal was to be active, to be able to exercise and hike and bike. And so we really used that goal to increase her lifestyle habits. And her goal was that she develop more muscle mass and less body fat and be healthier over time, which would then, of course, impact her comorbidities of potentially an increased risk of heart disease, osteoporosis, dementia, obesity, and stroke. And so her menopause symptoms, of course, she wanted all 7 symptoms improved. And what we did is we tracked her symptoms over time. I have developed an app for menopause symptom tracking. She used this app. She added hormone medication in the form of bioidentical FDA-approved estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone. She went through with pelvic floor physical therapy and was able to improve her dyspareunia. She was able to track and improve her healthy habits. So of course, her response is gratitude and appreciation. But I also was very grateful that I got to impact her healthy aging. And I really believe that if we look at this as a systemic problem and we offer systemic solutions with treatment, our current state is very problem-based. Women come in with a problem, let's say, of bladder issues, and they're treated maybe for a bladder infection, for a yeast infection, where we need to get to the root cause. Women and providers have very unclear expectations, and patients feel isolated and not heard. I believe that the goal state should be is that we have a very outcome-based algorithm care for all women. All of you who treat women with endometriosis and then you hand off your patient, let's say to a gynecologist, you expect, of course, that she will receive good care for her menopause symptoms. And unfortunately, that is not happening. And so I believe we all need to have clear expectations that we can treat women with menopause and that the patient's goals are met. But we have to start by asking the patient her goals. So I wrote a book about this, and it's been a very popular book to, again, we have to have more tools that help women understand their symptoms and to improve their care. So again, I thank you for your attention and look forward to discussion.
Thank you very much, Dr. Brittany. So now we have concluded all our 5 speakers' presentations. Now we have got 5 minutes for any questions arising from this interesting and timely talks.
So may I comment, please, before we don't have questions yet. So can I, please?
Maybe we could entertain some comments or questions from the panelists.
Yes. Thank you, Himanta. Himanta, I think this symposium was brilliant. Why? Because it was 100% patient oriented session, and you managed to cover things from the early fetal life until menopause, and this is awesome. And we have seen a lots of views from all speakers and different approaches. And I'm really thrilled that there is so much enthusiasm among our colleagues that's showing that women will get a good service. I have 2 questions. The first question for the first speaker about, have you looked at women with neonatal uterine bleeding? Is there any family background of endometriosis or not?
The background of endometriosis.
Family background. These 15 neonates, did their mothers have any history of endometriosis or not?
Yes, we also ask them the family history of dysmenorrhea.
But there was any association?
Yes.
Positive.
A cyclic pain.
Yes. Hemanta, till now in Jordan and in Emirates, endometriosis is not considered by the labor law as debilitating disease. The authority does not recognize that. Is that the same thing in Sri Lanka and Bangladesh and in Japan? Or
I think it's global, isn't it? I think that recognition is from what we have. But I think it's like what Bangladesh is showing. We have to take control and maybe do something about it. And that might be the way forward, really.
But the push from down is not enough. The push must be from above.
Yes, I think, yes. I agree with that, yes.
And I think from the recommendation of your Congress will be one for the policymakers to consider this disease as a debilitating disease.
Yeah.
I have tried to do it in Jordan, but they said to me, Arabs, they don't have endometriosis. And I proved it's wrong. But we are in the first step.
Yeah.
And I believe that menopause should be included in that same way, right? So, in terms of lost productivity and the impact on all the comorbidities of aging, the more and more, so the UK seems to be the only country that's paying attention to this as a problem affecting the workplace. So I think, even in the US, we need to advocate more for this to be a widespread acknowledged condition and get the attention that it deserves.
Yep.
Yes, I agree. That's the economic cost of it is often overlooked, and the productivity and all that. I think we can conclude.
Thank you very much, all of the panel members, Dr. Kenny Ogawa, Dr. Ikuko Giota, Dr. Shamin Abbasi, Professor Shamina Chowdhury, and Dr. Diana Bittner. And thank you very much for co-chair, Dr. Muammar Ejefu. We conclude this session and enjoyable evening for all of you all. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Shake, 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 shake.
Megamax High Strength Omega 3 1000 milligram Pure Fish Oil, the newest addition to the nutritional supplement portfolio of Principal Healthcare UK, an award-winning British brand trusted by over 7,500 healthcare professionals across the globe, offering premium, high-quality products to deliver proactive healthcare and nutritional solutions to you and your family. Megamax High Strength Omega 3 Pure Fish Oil meets the daily intake of EPA and DHA, contributing to joint, heart and brain health. What's more, Megamax is free from heavy metals and harmful toxins such as mercury, ensuring optimum safety. Megamax High Strength Omega 3 Pure Fish Oil has been certified by Friend of the Sea, the leading international certification for manufacturers of fish oil and omega-3 supplements, for its sustainable fishing practices to source fish oil to protect ocean bodies and freshwater wildlife. Megamax High Strength Omega 3 1000 milligram Pure Fish Oil, the newest addition to the nutritional supplement portfolio of Principal Healthcare UK, an award-winning British brand trusted by over 7,500 healthcare professionals across the globe, offering premium, high-quality products to deliver proactive healthcare and nutritional solutions to you and your family. According to a recent publication in September 2019 by the American Heart Association, omega-3 fatty acids are an effective and safe option to reduce triglycerides, while an early 2019 study by the New England Journal of Medicine shows that a prescription formula containing EPA could reduce heart attacks and strokes and deaths relating to these events in patients who are at high risk of cardiovascular disease or already have it. Megamax High Strength Omega 3 Pure Fish Oil meets the daily intake of EPA and DHA, contributing to joint, heart and brain health. What's more, Megamax is free from heavy metals and harmful toxins such as mercury, ensuring optimum safety. Megamax High Strength Omega 3 Pure Fish Oil has been certified by Friend of the Sea, the leading international certification for manufacturers of fish oil and omega-3 supplements, for its sustainable fishing practices to source fish oil to protect ocean bodies and freshwater wildlife. The all-natural marine triglycerides used in formulating Megamax fish oil is proven to be of a higher efficacy as opposed to ethyl ester. Rest assured, with no artificial flavors, colors or preservatives, Megamax makes sure you get the best omega-3 fish oil to maximize your health. Megamax High Strength Omega 3 1000 milligram Pure Fish Oil. Mega Omega for your heart. Maximum protection for your overall health.
The Ethicon sutras that I use in the hospital, the biggest thing that comes to mind is consistency. Just being able to trust that what I'm using works better than anything else that's out there.
The patient, I feel like, is getting the best suture experience from Ethicon sutures.
For management of endometriosis, choose the gold standard. Prescribe number 1 GnRHA in its class, Blue Pride Depot. Preoperative treatment with Luprolide. Offers reduction in ovarian mass volume by 56% in 3 months, reduces non-menstrual pain score by 47%. Post-operative treatment with Luprolide. Delays the relapse of endometriosis symptoms. Reduces rate of symptom recurrence.
As we all move forward, don't forget to get plenty of sunshine. Drink lots of water. Remember to really breathe. Stretch. Spend time with the people you love. Find your balance. Focus on the important things. Rest. Eat healthy. Laugh a lot. Soak it all in. And remember who we are. So strong, so resilient, so Sri Lanka.
The Ethicon sutras that I use in the hospital, the biggest thing that comes to mind is consistency. Just being able to trust that what I'm using works better than anything else that's out there.
The patient, I feel like, is getting the best suture experience from Ethicon sutures.
The Ethicon sutras that I use in the hospital, the biggest thing that comes to mind is consistency. Just being able to trust that what I'm using works better than anything else that's out there.
The patient, I feel like, is getting the best suture experience from Ethicon sutures.
A very good evening to all of you. We warmly welcome you to the Menstrual Health and Endometriosis. It's okay to talk about it, period, conducted by the UNFPA. I would like to welcome Professor Hemanta Senanayake to give the welcome address. Professor Hemanta Senanayake is the president of the Endometriosis and Adenomyosis Association of Sri Lanka and Congress Chair of the ACE 2021. He's an emeritus professor in University of Colombo. Over to you, sir.
Thank you for that introduction, and it's a great pleasure, as always, to welcome you to this session on It's Okay to Talk About, period. We need to talk about this. We've had so far 2 days of deliberations in this, and one thing that I'm realizing sitting in this Congress is that we have a jigsaw here which is growing. We started with a small jigsaw. Now it's growing. There are more questions and answers. So it's a fascinating area, endometriosis and adenomyosis. However, without public awareness, all this will be of no use. So I want to welcome you to this session. We want to take the message about endometriosis and adenomyosis to the public, and so that we have earlier diagnosis. And menstruation is culturally something that we don't talk about. That's something we must talk about. So I want to welcome Suren Naucha, who is the representative ad interim of the UNFPA Sri Lanka. She has served as deputy country representative of UNFPA in China before. Suren has about 25 years of working experience in national and international development and humanitarian work. Before joining the UNFPA in 2001, she served as a government officer responsible for population programs and the Ministry of Social Welfare and Labor in Mongolia. So welcome, Suren. Thanks for all the support you're giving us. The UNFPA has been supporting our work, and we really appreciate all that. Thank you very much. And I really wish this session the best of luck. I hope it will be useful, and that we will be able to get something useful from this session. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, very good evening. So on behalf of United Nations Population Fund, Sri Lanka, I'm really honored to speak today at this International Endometriosis Conference. And thank you so much for inviting us. As you know, that United Nations Population Fund is UN's sexual reproductive health agency with great mandate of creating a world where every pregnancy is wanted, every child is safe, every young person's potential is fulfilled. So this session today fits very well within UNFPA mandate because major challenge that women and girls across the world face is limited access to comprehensive, quality sexual reproductive health, including menstrual health, information and services. So according to the survey conducted by UNICEF, in Sri Lanka, 66% of girls in Sri Lanka are not aware of menstruation until its first occurrence. And topic of sexual reproductive health and menstruation is seen as taboo. And therefore, lots of stigma is attached to this subject. So menstruation is part of women's reproductive life. So not being able to discuss, share issues they face during menstruation and normalization of period pain can take serious toll on women's well-being and health. And shame, stigma, misinformation surrounding menstruation undermine well-being of women and girls, making them vulnerable to gender discrimination, exclusion, violence, poverty, untreated health problems. So UNFPA supports program addressing sexual and reproductive health needs of women and girls, including distribution of dignity kits which contain menstrual hygiene products, particularly for women and girls affected by humanitarian emergencies. We also support comprehensive sexuality education programs for both in and out of school adolescents and young people, which we teach about their bodies, health, and their rights. So endometriosis is one of such conditions that can affect women and girls and also can cause extreme pain during menstruation. So if not treated, this condition can cause infertility, other health issues for women, which all of you know much better than me as specialists and experts. So it's very important that women and girls are aware of these conditions that affect their health and know where they can seek help when needed. And just given my life experience that my daughter is actually a grown-up girl and she has menstruation pain, and she consulted once with the specialist, and it was what I was given that she can wait, and after maybe having first child, she might actually be healed. So this is actually one example, and endometriosis has significant social, public health, economic implications. It can impact quality of life due to severe pain and fatigue, depression, anxiety, infertility, so on. So some women and girls with endometriosis experience extreme pain, like my daughter, that prevents from going to work or school. So addressing endometriosis can reduce girls' absence from school or income loss for women. So in many countries, including in Sri Lanka, general public, even most of health service providers are not aware about endometriosis or other related conditions. And many even believing that period pain is normal and leading to normalized and stigmatized symptoms, resulting in significant diagnostic delay. Even if it is diagnosed, there are also delays in terms of provision of care services. Usually it's not, if it's not through government services, the costs are very high, which economically burden women and girls. So this has to change. So we are today as UNFPA, because UNFPA sees the importance of addressing endometriosis and creating a dialogue among medical professionals, women and girls, to raise awareness about it. And this will empower women and girls by supporting their rights to access the highest standards of sexual and reproductive health, which will enhance their quality of life and overall well-being. So we need to take action to uphold sexual and reproductive health rights of women and girls. So I look very much forward to a rich discussion on the importance of demedicalizing women's health issues and also focusing on social, cultural factors that affect women's health. And we must be able to talk openly about it and thereby encouraging others to also talk about it, thus breaking the taboo around it. After all, it's okay to talk about it, period. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you, Ms. Navcha. We will next move on to a short informative video.
සරල වශයෙන් කියනවා නම් ගර්භාෂය ඇතුලේ ඒ කියන්නේ ඒ තියෙන සිවියට අපි කියනවා එන්ඩෝමෙට්‍රියම් කියලා. එහෙම ඒ වචනෙන් තමයි මේ endometriosis කියන ඊනමත් එන්නේ. ඒ සෛල තියෙන්න ඕන ගර්භාෂයේ ඇතුලේ විතරමයි. ඒ සෛල ගර්භාෂයෙන් පිට වෙන තැන්වල පැලවෙනවා කියලා සිංහලෙන් සරල වශයෙන් අපිට කියන්න පුළුවන්. මේ සෛල ඒ පැලවුණාම ඔසප් වෙන කාලය වෙනකොට මේ සෛල වලින් රුධිරය වහනය වෙන්න පටන් ගන්නවා. එතකොට වෙන්නේ මේ සෛල වලින් එන ඒ රුධිරයට ශරීරයෙන් පිට වෙන්න විදියක් නැති වෙනවා. එම නිසා මෙතන තෙරපීමක් ඇති වෙනවා. අනිත් එක තවත් වෙන ප්‍රතික්‍රියා ඇති වෙනවා මේ පටකවල. ඒ නිසා ඒ අවයව එකට ඇලෙන්න බලනවා. අන්න ඒ ප්‍රතික්‍රියා තමයි මේ අසනීපයේදී වෙන්නේ.
So I started to experience these symptoms as early as when I was 16, and they started to get a little more severe when I was in my 20s. You know, when I go to the bathroom, like the bowel movements were really painful, like I would black out, and ovulation pain I feel like, you know, something's coming out of me, and chronic fatigue, like, you know, a bus has hit me, and all I did was just come out of the shower. So, and when I speak to women about it, they also just say, you know, period pain is normal.
අපට පෙනෙන දෙයක් තමයි අර මුලින්ම රෝග ලක්ෂණ ඇති වෙන්න පටන් ගත්ත වකවානුවේ ඉඳන් අවුරුදු 7ත් 10ත් අතර විතර කාලයක් යනවා හරි රෝග නිර්ණයකට පැමිණෙන endometriosis තියෙන කාන්තාවන්ගේ. ඒකට ප්‍රධාන හේතු කීපයක් තියෙනවා. හුඟක් ඒවා සමාජීය හේතු. හුඟක් වෙලාවට අපි අපේ දර්මියන්ට කාන්තාවන්ට කියන්නේ ඔසප් වෙන කාලයේ වේදනාව සාමාන්‍ය දෙයක්. ඒක උහුලගෙන ඉන්න ඕන දෙයක්. ඒක කාන්තාවකගේ ජීවිතයේ කොටසක් කියලා.
Deep inside, I knew that something was wrong, that this cannot be a normal life.
ඔසප් වෙන දිනවලට ඉස්කෝලේ යන්න බැරි නම්, ඉස්කෝලේ ගියත් සික් රූම් එකට වෙලා ඉන්න වෙනවා නම්, ඉස්කෝලේ ගියත් අර ක්‍රීඩා කටයුතු කරන්න බැරි නම්, බැඩට යන්න බැරි නම්, එහෙමනම් අපි ඒක සාමාන්‍ය දෙයක් හැටියට සලකන්න හොඳ නැහැ. ඒ වගේ වේදනාව අපි පිළිගන්න හොඳ නැහැ. ඒ වගේ තියෙන අය වෛද්‍ය උපදෙසක් ලබා ගන්න.
So my diagnosis actually happened by accident. I had like really bad leg pain and I was constipated, and I went to the doctors and they got me to do one scan. They said something, you know, it's in my head. Then my husband kept pushing, so I did the second, third, fourth. And the fifth one, my husband really said, just go get it done. And I was sitting there outside thinking they're going to again send me home, saying it's in my head. But they rushed me to the emergency room saying that, you know, you need to be operated right now, that your life is at risk. And, you know, thinking that I was ignored for a week and, you know, I was in such a state was really scary. And then after the surgery, they told me that you have endometriosis and it's more severe stage 4. That's it. They didn't explain what it's going to happen, you know, what I should do, that it's going to keep coming back. And what happened was it did really aggressively come back.
හුඟක් විදි වලින් ප්‍රතිකාර කරන්න පුළුවන්. සමහර විට සරල ඖෂධ වලින් මේකට අපට විසඳුමක් ලබා දෙන්න පුළුවන්. හැබැයි සමහර අය ඉන්නවා මේ ඖෂධ වලින් මේ සුවයක් ලබා දෙන්න බෑ. ඒ අයගේ අපට ශල්‍ය කර්මයකට යන්න වෙනවා. එතනත් වැදගත් කරුණක් තියෙනවා. අපි අද නිර්දේශ කරන්නේ endometriosis අසනීපයට ශල්‍ය කර්මයකට යනවා නම් ලැපරොස්කෝපි ක්‍රමයට තමයි ඒක කරන්න ඕන කියලා. ඒකේ විශේෂ වාසි තියෙනවා endometriosis අසනීපේ තියෙන අයගේ ශල්‍ය කර්මවලදී. එතකොට මේ ලැපරොස්කෝපි ක්‍රමයට මේ ප්‍රතිකර්මය ලබා ගන්න පහසුකම් දැන් ලංකාවේ හුඟක් රෝහල් වල තියෙනවා. පිටතල පළාත් වලත් අපේ රජයේ රෝහල් වල.
I started researching, you know, and saw a connection with diet, yoga, and I started doing trial and error and recording. And in the same time, I met this amazing endo specialist. Thanks to him and my changed lifestyle, you know, I have been pain-free for 5 years now.
endometriosis ගැන ඒ සාකච්ඡාව හුඟක් දුරට වෙන්නේ නැත්තේ අපි සාමාන්‍යයෙන් රටක් හැටියට ජාතියක් හැටියට අර ප්‍රජනන අධ්‍යාපනය ගැන එච්චර අවධානමක් යොමු කරලා නැහැ. මම හිතන්නේ මේක ගැන අපි විවෘතව කතා කරන්න යන්න ඕන.
Through the journey, I can say that the struggle is real, but I am happy I took action to turn things around and say that I am an endo survivor.
Now I would like to introduce the moderator for the next session, Dr. Jeevaranga Gunasekara. Dr. Jeevaranga Gunasekara is an MD trainee in community medicine. He holds a postgraduate diploma in health sector disaster management, master's in community medicine, and is currently pursuing his MD in community medicine at the Postgraduate Institute of Medicine, University of Colombo. Dr. Jeevaranga is specifically interested in sexual and reproductive health education for youth, health communication, especially using electronic and social media, and medical humanities. Over to you, sir.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's okay to talk about it, period. I think the fun was intended. So I'm glad to start this much needed public discussion on endometriosis as well as menstrual health in general. And because it's the clarity that we've got in that statement is something that is not so current in nowadays. So then first, let me tell kudos to UNFP and the organizers. Use the other one. This one. You couldn't hear anything? All right. All right, okay. I'll start all over. Right. Yeah, okay. It's okay to talk about it, period. I think the fun was really intended. And let me tell kudos to the UNFP and the organizing team for selecting a male to moderate the discussion. I think that indicates how relevant for all the communities to come together and to talk about endometriosis as well as menstrual health in general, and to dismantle the taboo and talk about myths and misconceptions. And so therefore, let me tell about the objective of today's panel discussion. So we have had 2 days of wonderful, fantastic discussions on the technicality, the scientific aspect, and the medical aspect of endometriosis. So this discussion is more towards talking endo in a view of the experiential manner, and how a healthcare personnel, as well as endo survivor and the society in large, how they perceive it, and how we can improve from that. So that is the basic objective of this discussion. And let me tell you a few ground rules. The ground rule is there's no rule. Basically, as long as we have respect and we can tolerate different perspectives and ideas and opinions, I think representing the audience, that's my responsibility to let you have an open discussion with different opinionated, at times even, to have a rich discussion on this matter. So now I think we have on our chat box, there's this Mentimeter link. What you can do is go there, click the link, and we have asked a simple question. So you can answer that question. So until then, let me introduce my distinguished panel of experts for today's discussion. I have quite a lengthy set of bios, so spare me some time with that. Joining us from New Zealand, we have Deborah Bush, MNZM, QSM, Diploma Teaching, LSB. She's a co-founder, consultant, Endometriosis New Zealand, Director, World Endometriosis Society, Coaching and Consultant, Endometriosis and Pelvic Pain, Founding Principal, World Endometriosis Organization. Deborah has had global influence on promotion and prevention of endometriosis. In 1998, she developed the world's first menstrual health and endo ME program for school, which has significantly influenced early recognition of symptoms in adolescents and timely intervention. It has been endorsed by World Endometriosis Society as a preferred school education program worldwide. She has developed other innovative CME health programs for workplace, and hospitals. She's a regular keynote speaker at academic conferences. She developed her private practice, endometriosis and pelvic pain coaching and consulting in 2001, which focuses on well-being. She was instrumental in developing a task force with the New Zealand government and with a diverse group of stakeholders under one common goal. Deborah's many international and national awards reflect her achievements and significant contribution to the literature. To name a few only, Queen's Service Medal, QSM, Queen Elizabeth II Honours 2003, Commonwealth Award for Excellence in Women's Health, and Paul Newman Award 2007, and the list goes on. Sarah Soisa, on to my left. Sarah Soisa is a passionate feminist in the sexual and reproductive health and rights field. She has completed her bachelor's in social work in Sri Lanka and completed her master's in gender and development studies at the University of Melbourne. She has been volunteering and working with national, regional, and faith-based organizations such as IPPF, Family Planning Association Sri Lanka, University of Melbourne Youth Research Division, South Asia Regional Youth Network, YPA Sri Lanka, Young Women Christian Association Sri Lanka and Australia, Asia Safe Abortion Partnership, to name some. She was also the advisor for Frida Feminist Fund and founding member of the coordinator of the Commonwealth Youth and Gender Equity Forum. She is currently the National Program Analyst on SRHR for UNFP Sri Lanka. Welcome, Sarah. On to my further left, Reshani Mikama. Reshani is a founder of Endometriosis Support and Awareness Foundation, ESAF, in Sri Lanka. Her mission through this foundation is to create much-needed awareness and support among Sri Lanka community in relation to the disease endometriosis. She is also a lawyer and serves as a director of RICTA Legal Service. In 2017, she was appointed by UNICEF as a legal research consultant for the National Child Protection Authority, Sri Lanka, to research on and formulate national laws for cybersecurity and offenses. I think now we must have got a few inputs through the Mentimeter. Can we go into that? Yes, here we go. The question was, have you heard of endometriosis? Yes, not too bad. Are we still getting? Yes. So yes counts to 6. The no is 3. So we have fairly well split audience. And I think it will be 100% after this event. Yes. Tissue in the same angle. So then the solutions as well as the perception of the society of that problem is rather difficult to comprehend. So this is something I personally feel like, it's happening to endometriosis and menstrual health in general as well. So now I'm glad that in previous 2 days we have had, very illustrious scientific discussions, which is extremely needed and timely for the scientific community to engage and for the betterment of the science. But again, it is also equally important for us to look at the cultural aspect, personal aspect, as well as communication aspect of endometriosis and menstrual health. So now I feel there are 3 cogwheels in this mechanism of looking at a disease. We have the individual, then we have the healthcare provider, and lastly, we have the society at large, which these 2 factors operate in. So I'm turning to Reshani. So she, as an endo survivor, and as somebody who has been working with people with endometriosis, what is it like living with endometriosis in Sri Lanka, especially in the Sri Lankan context?
Hi, Dr. G. It's actually an absolute pleasure to be here. Just one second, let me see. Hi, Dr. Jeev. It's an absolute pleasure to be here, and it's in fact like a really bittersweet moment. Thanks, Sarah, for bringing me here as well. Bitter because I wish this kind of exposure and this kind of dialogue had started when I was diagnosed or even during my school years. If it had, I wouldn't have gone through the tedious journey I had. And I'm still going through the ramifications because of the lack of knowledge and information and awareness. Sweet because finally it's happening, and honestly, personally, it's absolutely refreshing, and it's actually a huge relief, to say the least. So, having said that, your question was, how has my journey been with endometriosis, especially living?
And also the ones who you are with.
Of course, yeah. So, living with endometriosis, initially being diagnosed itself was a struggle.
Right.
I was misdiagnosed, I was undiagnosed, then I was misdiagnosed,
Right.
and then finally I was diagnosed.
Okay.
Initially, when I had debilitating pain and when I had to go and see a gynecologist at the age of 31, this specific doctor told me, after listening to my symptoms, one question she asked me was, do you eat from out? As in, do you have food outside your home kitchen?
Okay.
And I said, yes. And then she said, that answers it. You eat oily food and you come here and tell me you have irritable bowel and pain. That's it, go home.
So that was 31.
That was at age.
Like you didn't have any.
I've had very bad now. My school friends, if any of them are listening to this, would vouch for this. I have always had very complicated menstrual issues.
Okay.
As in pain, mostly pain. And just like Professor Hemantha said, I've had a personal experience where during midterm exams, during important events, I've had to cancel papers and stay in the sick room. So the pain was bad. But at that point, it didn't even occur to a teacher or a mother or my own mother to think they needed to show me, because at that time it was considered normal period pain.
You express it to them. Yet,
yes.
Yeah.
And even if I didn't, they would clearly see it, because I would be passing out. They would take me to the sick room. I would have to cancel papers. So you really can't blame anyone, because none of them knew. And the only thing my mother, my friends, my close loved ones would say is your period regular? Now, this is a question.
As long as it's regular.
So it was like clockwork. I said yes. The moment I said it's regular, everything else was considered okay. But little did they know, little did I know, endometriosis was waging war inside me.
And you said it was, it took a lot of time to, diagnose at 31.
Yeah.
Was it diagnosed at 31 or
No,
later?
Later, 5 years later.
All right. And you said it was misdiagnosed as well.
Yes, it was not diagnosed, it was misdiagnosed. Then when I went, they said it's probably a urine infection. So again, they gave me painkillers for a urine infection. So that was misdiagnosis. And then finally, when I was completely passing out, I had to stop. I'm a lawyer, so I had to stop practicing in courts. I was having cold sweats. I was passing out in pain that I can't describe. Right? Some say it's close to labor pain. Some say it's more. I wouldn't know. But it was pain where I had to roll in my garden just to feel like some hard ground on me, just so that I could kind of feel I'm just putting the pain on something else.
But you didn't know anything.
I didn't know anything. And
what were you attributing it really to at that time? That pain, like, was it just to menstruation, or
no? It started with menstruation, and then
in your head, what were you attributing it to? It is because of the menstruation.
Just regular period pain, like a woman's lot kind of thing. Because everyone, I would ask my friends; they would also have period pain, but little did we know that these were very different levels, right? Then finally, I had to go see another gynecologist here in Sri Lanka, and when I told, and that by this time, my pain had spread throughout the month, not just with my period, but it was right throughout the month, back to back, every day. So I was just popping a painkiller, and then finally, at that stage when I went, this particular doctor said, look, I suspect that you have endometriosis just with my symptoms. So different, this is what I'm saying, so different to what the rest of them said. And he said, let's run a scan on you. After so many years, that was the first time they ran a scan on me. And then I remember he peered into the screen and said, Rashani, I think it's what we suspect. I can see, it's probably chocolate cyst, he said.
So how has the diagnosis, your proper diagnosis at that stage, has it changed the way that you look at your life and the management and all? How has it improved your quality of life and large?
Well, at that point, when he first said it was chocolate cyst, I had no idea. When he said chocolate cyst, I thought, chocolate cyst? I mean, what is that, you know? And then I went home, Googled a bit, found out, and then I came back, and then by this time he told me, this is the disease, it's endometriosis. We need to see if we can control it with some, I think, induced menopause. With oral contraceptives that didn't work, and then finally they had to take me in for surgery. Unfortunately, the doctor who diagnosed me via a scan passed away. 3 months into diagnosing, he passed away. So that was heartbreaking. But finally, then I had to go to another doctor, and there again a small mishap happened. Instead of doing a laparoscopy, they ended up doing a laparotomy. Now, this is a huge no, because I had frozen pelvis where all my organs were stuck together with severe adhesions. Later on, they said that they should never have done a laparotomy on a patient who has such severe adhesions because it can get worse. So that itself, then there was an issue there. But at least I'm grateful that my pain was relieved. It's relieved of my pain.
Yeah, I think that brings us to, now that's one aspect of it, is the individual aspect of it. That brings us to the other aspect of it, which is the healthcare providers. One reason how you said there have been a few misdiagnoses and a few mismanagements. So perhaps that could all be attributed to the lack of knowledge and misconceptions, as well as lack of training on this particular area for healthcare providers. So with that, I'm turning to Deborah from New Zealand. How would you elaborate on this, Deborah? How can we getting to know these deficiencies? How can we improve from this? What can we really do to improve the awareness of healthcare providers on this matter?
Well, thank you so much for sharing your story. There were so many aspects of your story that I hear from people all over the world. And in fact, I was hearing when I first set up Endometriosis New Zealand in 1985, I heard similar stories by people saying the same things. And that's why I started thinking about a menstrual health program for schools in the mid-1990s. And this has made a huge difference in New Zealand to get into schools with a proper professional program and educate our young people about menstrual health and also some of the things that go wrong. So, you know, we've got some very key messages, but quite simple messages too. And we're very mindful about not making it negative, not telling, you know, really sort of bad stories about these things, but rather that periods are normal. It's okay to talk about it. That's what we're here today. And getting those conversations starting to happen, but also reminding our young people that periods which interrupt your life and which stop you doing normal everyday things and put you into the sick room at school. I think that's what came out in your story. Or, you know, I mean, sometimes the three messages are, if you're ever in the sick room at school, if you ever don't go to school because of your period, or if you ever don't do things with your family and friends because of your period, then that's not a normal period. And so they're quite simple messages around a well health teaching program. And in my own private practice now, so 22 years since the program started, now 62% of the patients I see are under 20. diagnosed with endometriosis, managed well, and able to get on with their lives. So we know that education in schools can make a really big difference about menstrual health. And I think that we need to put some emphasis around menstrual health rather than menstrual ill health, so that we have a really positive aspect, because all the taboos sort of make it unhealthy, and that's the thing that really has to change. A positive approach to something that's quite natural, and you know, it's about reproduction, it's about life and energy, and I think that that's important.
So your approach would be, now what you are suggesting is to empowerment of girls, and the society in general could pressure the, could be an advocacy group or the pressure group for healthcare providers, think about menstrual health and endometriosis as a possible reason for this pain. Is that what you are suggesting?
I think the approach has to be, I'm going to call it multi-pronged. So we can't just educate our young people in schools without also bringing to the attention of our doctors and our health professionals that this will be happening, and also our health decision makers in our government. Because you can do all the education and empowerment at this level, but if those young people are still meeting barriers when they go to the doctor, then we're only doing things half-heartedly.
And one very important thing I think I really caught from you is that now talking about menstruation as a general body function rather than a health issue, or maybe as a illness, is very important. That's that's because now when we are talking about, I mean, this happens to 50% of the population, so it cannot be something, you know, abnormal. But again, looking at menstruation as a normal thing is necessary for us to understand what is abnormal. So perhaps, I mean, that's a very good starting point, I think, you know, understanding the normalcy and what is natural, isn't it, Deborah? What do you think?
Yes, absolutely. And I think that we use two words, and they're both subjective. So the two words that we use in the program are actually discomfort and distress, where discomfort might be normal and responds well to some simple over-the-counter pain relief. And there might be a niggle, but distress with a period is never normal. So while they're not medical terms, people tend to understand what you mean when you say discomfort versus distress. And those two words we use them quite a lot.
Coming from a medical background, what I feel is now yes, during the med school you were taught about menstruation and menstrual illnesses as a pathology, where the diseases are discussed more often. But again, regarding the culture, regarding the societal aspect of it, is rather ignored. I think perhaps as a medical humanities, if we can teach students at the med school regarding the cultural and taboos and misconceptions around this, not just menstruation, but all normal bodily functions. I think that will be a really good start, to go ahead. Yes.
Yeah, so I think a really positive, a positive approach is always better than going in with something negative and really terrible stories that can be quite frightening for young people. And we don't want them to get terrified of having their period. So I really think that we have to be quite careful in the kinds of messages that we are delivering also.
Yeah, that brings, I think that sets the stage for us to talk about the third cogwheel. We discussed about the individual aspect, then the healthcare perspective, now the society at large. Again, like all these, now everybody operates within the society. So the myths and misconceptions as well as the taboos dictate how we are going to talk about this natural thing. So what do you think about it, Sarah? Now, as long as we are not talking about the natural thing, are we willing to talk about the illness? Not at all, I believe.
Well, I will share my thoughts from a very Sri Lankan context as well.
Yes,
So
I think Navcha also mentioned that a high percentage of young girls don't go to school when they have their first period, and about 37% do not go to school every month when they have their period. So I'm going to talk about menstrual health and hygiene at large. We even call that menstrual health and hygiene because usually we hear the word menstrual hygiene. Kind of gives us the idea that this is a hygienic issue, this is about
It's a dirty
cleanliness,
thing,
it's a
so you have
dirty
to
thing,
be
bad blood and
careful
all.
of, yeah.
That's why we talk about it as health and hygiene, giving it a broader perspective, because it's not just about releasing blood or whatever. There's a lot around it. It's about women and girls' dignity. It's about their rights. It's about their health. It's about everything. It's about their mental health, emotional health, everything. So a lot of speakers shared the issue with lack of awareness and access to accurate information, and also I would definitely like to pitch in there, as well as UNFPA. Also, we do lobby and advocate quite a lot on comprehensive sexuality education, which is something that schools should provide children with. Comprehensive sexuality education. It's not just about sex, it's about your lifestyle, your relationships, your biology, like, myths and misconceptions like we talk about. So if we have that in place, especially for young people, you don't feel scared to talk about it. You will be more open about it. There's a conversation between girls and boys, like there's no distinction, So like this needs to be provided to everyone. And then I also heard the conversation about healthcare providers. Even in Sri Lanka, I would say, from my experience, from my friends' experiences, healthcare providers, it's the knowledge is there, everything is there, but the rights-based approach to healthcare provision, the gender responsiveness, that's missing. So the way you diagnose, the way you treat, the way you look at it is different. Even with menstrual health, it's not just menstrual health, it's not a standalone topic.
It's not even reproductive health. It's perhaps, it cut across all health areas, like even in general nutrition, take any other aspect. It's this biomedical model of looking at the problem. Yeah.
Of course, there's an aspect on nutrition. There's you might not even think about it, but menstrual health could be related to virginity. I will come to that when we talk about the product. There could be gender-based violence linked with it. So there could be, and also mostly like lack of access. Like young people will have missed opportunities, especially young girls will have missed opportunities because of this. Like they can't go to school as usual. It could be employment opportunities. It could be simply things like playing sports. And the shame around it, the taboo, like you might, there are different derogatory terms that are used to make fun out of it. Like, and also like this whole clean business and not being able to go to religious places and all that. So it's like a lot of things, not just about...
Any particular thing that we can, you said, like correctly said, comprehensive sex education could be the best method to debunk these myths and misconceptions. Any other approach that you're suggesting?
But also, Rashani also mentioned, if my mother also knew about it, it would be important. So we can't just push the responsibility to teachers or the systems.
Yeah.
The conversation needs to happen at home. It needs to happen at school. We need to see this on media and TV, what we see in media when we see these products advertised also. It's like this blue color thing that you see, nothing about periods, nothing about menstruation. Like they try to romanticize the conversation. But we need to have open conversations.
Yeah, I can bring a bit of my personal experience. I once remember I went to the supermarket to buy a packet of sanitary napkins. Oh my God, then the taboo. And the person who gave the packet to me, covered it with one packet and then two covers. Then I felt like, okay, I don't use polythene. Why you should? I mean, so similarly, so now in comprehensive sex education, I think it's one misconception is it is to do with educational sector only. It is from your parents, it's from maybe even from your cultural or religious organizations, in the society in general. So that's something that we have to, diversify, isn't it?
Definitely. I mean, we have moved to a virtual world at the moment with COVID. So there are so many online sites and materials that you can use which gives you accurate information, not the inaccurate ones that we usually young people search for. So this is a good opportunity to actually talk about taboo topics. So, like menstrual health, sexual reproductive health, because now it's online. So maybe the teacher doesn't also have to teach. So there can be a lot of self-learning, self-reading materials, using cartoons, anime, whatsoever. But this is a conversation you need to have before you get your period. And it not just for girls, like you said, but boys who are around you, your parents, your fathers. everyone.
Yeah, and it's a very good important point is before you have your menstruation. That is because you take the metaphor of you learn about maths before you become an engineer. You learn biology before you become a doctor or anybody related to it. But again, when it comes to menstruation and SRH, you wait until you are at your reproductive age, when you wait until you are married and about to deliver to learn about things. Isn't it
it's a
quite
life
strange
skill.
approach?
It's not like maths and science, it's a life skill. The person who teaches or talks about it should have a different approach. Like it's our, it's biological or non-biological, but it's our lifestyle and life's choices and life skills. So it's a different approach, not like this is how it is, black and white. That doesn't work like that.
Yeah, my point was like I'm
agree with
supporting
you,
the fact
Sarah.
that
Sorry.
start discussing. Yeah, sorry, Deborah, you can join.
Oh no, I was just I was just going to jump into the conversation there. I agree with what you're saying, Sarah. And in fact, the Me program in New Zealand goes to all students, so boys and girls as well. And the boys are really interactive in the sessions. And I think, this is a human function. This is something that happens. So to talk about it, to hear 15, 16-year-old boys discussing it in groups and through the program, it's not something that the students are separated for. And I think that's been incredibly helpful. And the program really gears itself to all students rather than just singling out the girls and separating the boys out because it's not something they should talk about. And the other thing that I think came up in the conversation was a statistic. You said, there was so many who don't go to school every or most months. Actually, I presented on that statistic at this conference. So for those listening, what we know is 71% of under 25s have severe dysmenorrhea. That means painful periods. So no one is alone, even though you might feel alone. And then globally, the school absence on average, right around the world with bad periods, is around 31%. So that's more than a quarter. So if you're thinking that this is just me and I'm isolated and I'm on my own and other girls don't seem to be going through what I'm going through, actually more than a quarter of the girls in the world are not able to go to school every or most months because of bad periods. So this is not just an issue in New Zealand or Sri Lanka. Rather, it's a global issue. And I think sometimes coming at from that angle is also really, really helpful.
Yes. That brings us a very important point. That is, we should not look at endometriosis or in menstrual health. It's something only affecting the women who's menstruating. It's affecting the economy. It's affecting everybody. It's affecting men and like in the society in general. So if you look at the cost, opportunity cost, right, at work or at education institutions, so that's quite a lot. So like if that's perhaps one way of advocating this issue to policymakers. I mean, not just looking at it as a menstrual issue. Yeah.
Can I have something?
Yeah, please. Please use the mic. Yeah.
Sorry, so with menstrual health, I know endometriosis is definitely part and parcel of the game. But here I would like people also to realize that endometriosis, I'm sure Deborah would know this much better than me, endometriosis is actually a whole body disease. It's just not a bad period, right? And that is something we clearly need to deliver, right? It is a whole body disease and it is something apart from just a bad period.
So it's not a painful menstruation itself.
No,
it's not at all. That's
not at all.
very valid
Something
point.
very, very important to know. So
Yeah. Now, yes. Now, Roshani, I would like to ask this question from you now. Now, sometimes we tend to have these cocktails of management modalities where we say, okay, for endometriosis, if you are at stage 3 or 4, this is what you need to do. I mean, anybody who's in that stage, you don't really look at their options, what they desire, what choices they have, what reproductive choices they have. Basically, a blanket, sort of a management we give. So now, how important it is to look endometriosis in the client's perspective? I think you have a lot of experience to share, even not just from your experience, but also the women that you're working with.
Yeah, that's a really good question, Dr. Jeev. So I believe you're looking at like patient-centered or patient-centric care, right? That is so vital. While it is also my personal truth, I've had so many women in Sri Lanka telling me that when you go to a doctor and you say you have pain and finally they do tell you it's endometriosis, it cannot stop from there, right? They have to explain. Yes, they will give you a stage depending on the severity of your case.
Okay.
Now, in my instance, it was not even 4th. They said you have no stage, it's more than 4th. I mean, I came after surgery and I didn't even know what that meant.
Okay.
Right? So it's very important.
So what you say is from the client's perspective, those stages are material.
Those stages are material, even if, say, from a secondary care facility, if you go on to a tertiary care treatment, at least you go with that categorization, which is important, right? No doubt. But having said that, it's very important to also inform the patient of other relevant factors like evidence-based lifestyles that can help manage the situation.
Okay.
And it is also very important to let the patient know that just because a surgery is done, your endometriosis doesn't go away. Now, those are fundamental, simple things that your doctor and your healthcare provider has to tell you, right?
Yeah, right.
And also, you can't tell your patient, okay, the best way to manage your endometriosis is run and get pregnant.
No,
you have to ask the patient what the patient wants.
Choice what they
that
want,
is
exactly.
key to a patient-centered or patient-centered service.
Yeah, and
right?
that also brings now there are different. Even though we are individuals, we come from different cultural norms, societal and religious, requirements at times. So
Correct.
therefore, we have to address that as well.
Correct.
So not just what is best suited to your medical condition would not be the ideal solution at times.
Exactly. I mean, number one, getting pregnant is not a solution for endometriosis. The thing with endometriosis is an oral contraceptive you can induce menopause and try and manage it. If you must, surgery is needed. There are also alternate methods that can help in the process, like acupuncture, naturopathy, Ayurveda. So the thing is, it's a multidisciplinary approach that you need to take. And that is why a patient has to be kept informed, not only by a doctor. Even at a grassroots level, you can give a health.
We have midwives in our field level, yes.
So just to tell you, Dr. Jeev, now my foundation, as you can see, ESAF, the Endometriosis Support and Awareness Foundation. Our tagline is "Her fight is my fight," and another tagline is "Fight like a girl." What we are striving to do is at grassroots level, at schools, at garment factories, at corporates, to give guidelines to women and to girls and even men. If you have these red flags, debilitating pain, irritable bowel, brain fog, severe fatigue, and many other symptoms, severe migraines with periods, mood fluctuations, bloating, I can list out a whole lot. If you have these, then take that as an indication to at least go see your physician. So, as a lawyer, I am trying to see how, in a legislative sense, we can make some changes. Because it has to come from that point and it has to trickle down from there.
Right.
So while we educate at grassroots level, schools, garment factories, etc., the law really needs to change.
Right. That needs to come up with the demand. Definitely. So when you create the demand in the grassroots and in the healthcare setting, and that's the right time for you to come up with legislation.
Correct. I mean, if the law assists us in giving mandatory guidelines, even to healthcare providers saying, okay, yes, your gold standard diagnosis comes with a laparoscopy. But if a patient walks into your office and tells you these symptoms, then at least take the help of an ultrasound scan just to help you diagnose. Take that investigative process going, get it going. That can make such a difference. So if we can structure those guidelines with the healthcare providers and society at large, it'll really, really help, and it'll help to sort of shorten the gap
Right.
between symptoms and your
and the
ultimate,
diagnosis.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because
And
of suffering prolonged, right?
You mentioned something about looking at the treatment as in a holistic manner, not
Correct.
just surgery, not just medicine. Would you like to expand on that? What do you mean by?
Yes. So, but what I mean is now, say endometriosis is an enigma, right? Your symptoms can vary from person to person.
Yeah.
Treatment options can vary from person to person. So, it's very important to realize that surgery or induced menopause is not the only way to go about it. Now, in the event of induced menopause, where they give you oral contraceptives to stop your period for a while so that it can suppress the endometriosis, yes, it works. But you have to also realize the moment you stop, it can come back. Secondly, oral contraceptives can have so many side effects.
Maybe
you have to inform your patient.
Maybe that the point is now diagnosis is not the end of the journey, not the end of the problem.
Correct.
So what we always highlight, it takes 7 to 10 years to diagnose.
Yeah.
Yes, you diagnose, that's the end of it. Now you're all fine.
Yes.
So it's not the case.
No,
now
not
with
at
that, I'd like to turn to Deborah. Now I think it's important for us to maybe in our context we have resource limitations, we have human resource limitations, as well as funding. But again, we need to know what is the gold standard, what do we have internationally, globally available. And science is moving so fast, so there are newer and more precise methods of dealing with this issue. So Deborah, would you like to share some of your knowledge on what are the available treatment modalities and evidence-based available modalities, not just surgery, not just the standard, but again looking at the disease and the treatment in a holistic manner?
Right. Well, yes, I can speak on that. In fact, this is what I base my private practice on. I've got my private clinic is called EP Coaching and Consulting. So gynecologists refer their patients to me as part of a multidisciplinary team. And I work with the patient in a well health coaching environment. So we're looking at their diet, their nutrition, their exercise, their well health, their attitudes. Sometimes, as you were saying, with the burden of disease being a long time from symptom to diagnosis, sometimes this affects their mental health, their relationships, their schooling, their career. So the impact on their quality of life. Now, I think if looking at Sri Lanka now, what we have in the world that we didn't have back when I was first starting out on this journey to make change last century. We didn't have the international guidelines that we have now. And I think these will be very helpful to you because they all suggest a multidisciplinary approach to treatment and management. And I think that you're in your own society and in the education that happens. And then I would also be getting a small group together to a combined group. So patients, clinicians, I put a task force together in 2015. So I had the Royal College of GPs, I had the Ranscog Fellows, I had the Faculty of Pain Medicine, I had patients, and I had Endometriosis New Zealand. And so I was able to form a task force with the Ministry of Health of New Zealand, and then with government, get our clinical pathway across the line. So we've got a New Zealand specific clinical pathway using those resources from around the world to talk about what is best practice treatment. What does a doctor do, a first-line doctor in primary health, a GP, do when this young person, this child presents with severe dysmenorrhea or periods affecting their quality of life, right through to the referral to a tertiary centre and what patients should expect. And this is available to patients through various forms. So now I'm at the stage now where it's across the line and I'm driving it home again now because we need to implement it. I've said to our ministry, it's no good sitting on your website gathering dust. We need to get out there and implement it now. And so there's a program for that that we will be doing to make sure that doctors, and so I'm running continuing medical education now for GPs. And so I think that's perhaps a strategic plan, isn't it? What do we need to do for the best effect with this, usually, this very limited funding that's going to deliver the best results in the shortest time? Because
So
we've got to stop the suffering.
So what you highlight is having the treatment modalities is one thing, but getting it to the necessary people is another. So we were discussing about the accessibility and affordability factor of treatment and proper treatment rather for endometriosis. What do you bring with that? Like availability factor.
I can talk about the menstrual health related products at this stage. Like we talked about endo, but also like we might think like a lot of women have access to sanitary napkins, but the LMRD survey says only 29% of Sri Lankan women access sanitary napkins, which was quite shocking to me at one point. But then when you actually have conversations with people, you realize a lot of people have different options. A lot of women and girls still use clothes, and there's absolutely nothing wrong in using clothes, but the issue is again the cultural aspects and the stigma comes in where you can't dry your clothes outside in the sunlight. There's a lot of shame and taboo, so you do it inside, so which can be very unhygienic in a way. But and then there are different products, like we see, like there are reusable sanitary napkins, there are reusable underwears, there's the menstrual cup and tampons and different things, but there are different factors. The cost factor, the affordability, accessibility is one, especially during the pandemic. We saw that sanitary napkins or menstrual health products were not prioritized. It was not like an essential item at first. So people really suffered, not just COVID, but maybe a flood or whatever. They really suffer. That's why we also include sanitary napkins in our dignity and hygiene kits during humanitarian response. This is not something we think about. We think of food and other things, but this is about dignity. This is about your, self-respect. It's about yourself. So it's very important to look at that as well. And the other cultural things that can come with the product. So we say, oh, the cup is great.
Okay.
Very good for the sustainability and
just
the
look at one
environment.
aspect of it.
Yeah, it's great. But in Sri Lanka, I don't know how it is in other countries, the whole misconceptions around virginity comes into play, where inserting something could make you lose your virginity. So cup is a very difficult product to promote.
Not just now with a bit of my insight, not just for virgins, not just for women who hasn't lost their hymen, but also for, like, if it is not a habit of inserting something inside, even once you lose your virginity, but it's still a taboo, still something that you wouldn't do, right?
It's also not just about inserting. We are very, we don't talk about things. We're very shy. We don't talk about it at school. There are so many women and girls when you go to a workshop and ask who have not seen their genitals up close or from a mirror, because they're just shy to look at it, think something is wrong with it. So then, even if there's something wrong with it, you wouldn't know how it would look, whether you get an STI or whatever, you wouldn't know because you haven't seen it. So it also goes with pleasure and other aspects, because you don't know your body well. So there's a lot of shame around this. That's why it's difficult in a context like Sri Lanka for tampons, cups and things like that. And the other factor is when you talk about products is the cost. It is very difficult for people to afford even. That's why sometimes people opt for sanitary napkins, because the long-term methods could be quite expensive, although it lasts longer.
At the beginning.
And the change of mindset and behavioral change and all that. So it's all of that.
Yeah, it's very important, not just the girls to talk about it, but also the men to really jump into the discussion. Then, especially when it's regarding to menstruation and menstrual health. But that's something that all of us, like, I believe everybody who's in the SRH field has had some sort of experience with comprehensive sex education, which are good, but still, but it's something we are really finding difficult to get into the mainstream. What do you think about it?
Yeah, it's mostly the shame and all. I know when there was a book that came out recently on comprehensive sexuality education, and one of the issues with the book was also related to menstrual health, because people feel like this is not something to
it's
talk
not
to
something-
boys and girls about.
yeah.
This is a secret thing that you should talk to girls about. But the respect, like if your partner is a man, let's say, to going to the shop buying sanitary napkins, this should be normalized. This should be something normal. But it's like buying drugs or something like that, you know. So that's because of the whole conversation.
Yeah. So now I think Deborah once mentioned about this thing, the Me campaign. I think now we have this menstrual health related issues. On top of that, we've got another issue, that's a COVID pandemic. So not just the menstrual health issues, endometriosis, but all aspects of health has been affected, especially the ones that we do prioritize less, things that we think not emergency, not really needed at this moment, are being rather neglected and left to discuss in a time the COVID is over within commas. Yes. So now, how did you find this Me campaign, which you did? I understand in New Zealand, Australia, and in India, and how, as a country that we've been backward on CSC, take lessons from that.
Well, the Me program, menstrual health and endometriosis, was trialled in South Australia very successfully, and they're now up and running with their program, and was trialled in Vancouver, and they're now starting to do their program. When I was speaking at a meeting in India many years ago, it was trialled there in 2 schools and very, very successfully. But what is happening now with COVID is that at the beginning of last year, the schools were not accepting guest speakers in, and also schools were obviously, we had a very strict lockdown here. And so I started to think about the best way to proceed from here was to develop an online program. So Me Online follows similar principles and practices and key messages, but it will be an online program. It's not available yet because we're still working on it. It's taking a lot of time also to make sure that we're going through the correct protocols with the program. So it will include gamification. We're working with Otago University down in the South Island of New Zealand. We're working with other multidisciplines actually, to include things like lifestyle and nutrition, and because it really, I suppose, annoys me a little bit when people say, I'm on the endo diet. And when we look at the literature, there is no such thing as the endo diet. But there are foods which can make the bowel-related symptoms of endometriosis so much worse. They can be exacerbated. So making sure that the program is medically responsible, but also fits with educational trends. So we're just working through that, and I would think that hopefully by May next year we'll be ready to release the Me Online. I think that's what it's going to be called, but it's a lot of fun, and we're working hard to do that at the moment. But I take what the points that have been said here about evidence-based lifestyle things. And I think it's really important for people when they think, well, it's COVID, I can't get into my doctor, I can't, I've been turned down for my surgery. And this is happening all over the world. I'm sure Sri Lanka too, but certainly in New Zealand, where endometriosis surgery is considered elective. Is that the same over there? Elective procedure.
Elective.
Yeah, elective.
Yeah.
So not emergency.
It's both. To my knowledge, it's both. Yeah, I believe it's a
and I
case.
guess it can be here if a patient presents to ED, but what we're finding is with people having delayed appointments and surgeries cancelled, that they also need something that they feel empowered that they can do for themselves. So looking at those evidence-based things, and sadly, if they aren't readily available, women just turn to their phone and next minute they're Googling
Yes,
And they land
correct.
up somewhere
So
where
that's
you don't even know where they've landed, and they come up with often some things that are really so unhelpful.
and I think that opens up another important factor, that is the importance of communication about this thing, especially online. That's the first place that we go. I mean, the recent research showed, and 40% of people, even before going to their GP, I mean, it's experience. Your nodding is there. So they basically Google, and Google is your doctor now, the first GP,
Yes,
not
yes,
us.
yes. Hey, we've got the same doctor here.
So that's the importance of the healthcare providers, health educators, and communicators to have that information available. Maybe not in a very scientific literature way, not in the scientific journals only. Like, it is also important to put into lay terms. In forums, it's important for them to actively participate in social media communication, engage, perhaps have a richer conversation in social media groups and so on. What do you think, Deborah? I think that's the approach that we've taken partly in this also.
I think it's just a sign of the times, but sometimes I ask my patients how many social media sites for endometriosis they're on, and they felt very proud to tell me that nearly all of them. And of course, there are tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of open and closed social media sites and platforms for endometriosis. And I think that we have to be very, very careful. I generally advise them to choose the one or the ones that you think are adding value to your life and ditch the rest, because what happens to our brain is we're constantly reminded of pain. She's in pain, she's in pain. All around the world, everyone's in pain, I'm in pain. And this pain cycle is constantly reinforced if you're on this reminding yourself all the time, when there are lots of things that we can also be doing as well as being engaged with our local group. For instance, I don't know whether your local group, Rashini, has a social media page or a closed group, or what you do.
Yes, sir. Yes.
So my foundation, keep forgetting this.
Yeah, that's
my
fine.
foundation, Deborah, I'm happy to say, we did our endometriosis launch walk in March. And then we launched our website and Instagram and Facebook pages. And everything's researched material, evidence-based lifestyle tips. And so it's pretty comprehensive, because personally, I've been down that road where I've gone and tried to be my own doctor long years ago, and it can be so confusing and so overwhelming. And as you say, endometriosis doesn't always have to be negative, because if you manage it properly, you can reclaim a quality life, right? But the thing is, you have to know where to go and what to do for your case.
So how was the engagement on social media with your people, like, on
I mean, I was
what
amazed.
What social media you have used?
So we have Facebook,
Right.
Instagram, and my website, and I have a little YouTube channel that we're just doing up. And I've done a few interviews. I've gone and just spoken to people about my story, and it's so helpful, because Sri Lankan women here realize that they're not alone anymore, and that it's okay to talk about it. So that really made a huge difference.
I think that's such an important, because social media is one place you tend to dissociate yourself a bit from yourself. I mean, it's a safe space, if at all, if that is the only safe space we have in the country.
Absolutely.
It's like a place that we really can vent our frustration.
Yes.
Perhaps, I mean, yes, as Deborah said, it brings a lot of negativity. But again, for you to find that positivity, find that the hope, you need to vent it out. So perhaps the platform that you're making is such a valuable resource in that case.
Thank you.
Deborah, I'm getting back into you. Like, you wanted to chip in. Is it something regarding this?
Oh, I'm just excited to hear what you've just told me. So congratulations on that. And I would like to know whether your group would like to know about the World Endometriosis Organization. So maybe that's something that you would like to join and be part of a global collaboration of other organizations around the world. So we could be in touch about that. I think that would be super.
Oh, thanks so much, Deborah. I'm super excited.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love the fact that one of the
Go ahead.
things that might be is that you could engage your local clinicians and have them contribute to your website, and also they could be driving their traffic, their patients to your website, because they trust that this is good information, it's credible, trustworthy, medically responsible, you know, and so and it has current information, evidence-based information, and doctors might be really searching for somewhere where can I send this patient to get the good information that's in lay terms. So well done. I congratulate you. This is really good news.
Thanks so much. Thanks very much.
We don't want to limit the discussion for this panel, so we have our chat box, the listeners, audience. I'd like to ask you to put your questions there. Even if you feel like after another 20 minutes, you can raise your hands if you wish to. Then we'll unmute you. Or you can put your questions in the chat box. So after the discussion, we will take questions one by one and we'll discuss with the panel. Deborah, I'm particularly interested with the approach with the Me campaign that you've done in India. So because that's somewhere that we can really draw parallels to Sri Lanka. So what sort of challenges did you face there? How did you overcome them?
Well, I was invited to speak at a meeting that was taking place in Mumbai, and I was asked by one of the clinicians who invited me if I wouldn't mind doing a couple of sessions of the Me program in some of the girls' schools. Actually, at the time, it was a few years ago now, and I've got you know, what was surprising really was that I virtually delivered that program. I don't deliver it anymore. I like young people to do it. I do the training, but I found that they engaged in the same way as our students. They had the same issues, and the gynecologist who had invited me was there with me, and he was swarmed with girls wanting to ask questions, and you could see that all of a sudden there was this enlightenment from them that somebody was listening, somebody had heard. And I even told them some of my my little stories that I used to tell in the program about my grandma and what it was like for her growing up when you didn't talk about periods, and the kinds of sanitary wear that they used to use. And you know, I've always liked, being an educationalist, like to make things fun. So they were laughing as well, and it was very engaging, and it went down very well. So, but I think having something that is evidence-based and gives people hope that they can try, you know, it might be to recognize, I encourage my patients to think about the symptoms that are the most dominant and the most life-altering for them. And it may be for them bowel-related symptoms, so the IBS type symptoms, in which case they could look at the foods that tend to get in the way these days, that there's doing lots of study in Australia, are a group of foods called FODMAPs. So they're difficult to digest carbohydrates. Okay. And it isn't eliminating them all at the moment. I'm not a qualified dietitian, so I can guide them, but it might be this is something that patients right around the world can be thinking, gosh, if this is something that I could ease myself, that would be really helpful. You know, and the same with exercise. It's really hard for people to get out and exercise when they're not well, but we know exercise is the best non-drug treatment for pain. And so while we don't expect everyone to be dressed in lycra and out there, you know, pounding the pavements or at the gym, lovely gentle walks are a lovely thing to do, yoga type exercises, but we also know not to put too much strain on the core. The core is already traumatized. So there are different ways that we can start to feel empowered despite the fact that we've got a debilitating disease. The other thing I'll just mention while it's in my head, because I think is something like, let me check. 20 past 1 in the morning. So if I'm looking a little bit
We
bleary-eyed,
forgot
that's
it.
why.
We just forgot that factor. Anyway.
So one of the things I was going to say is when you go to the doctor, to be honest about all the symptoms. I think women the world over choose the symptoms that they think are the most important, or they think that the doctor wants to hear, or they're too embarrassed to tell the doctor. So often those things are, if someone is having really painful sex, that's such an important symptom to tell the doctor, because painful sex is never normal. So those are the kinds of things that, be honest, write your list down and make sure you're telling, so that the doctor has the whole picture for you.
So basically now we tend to tell the doctor which we recognize as abnormal. So if you recognize pain during menstruation is normal, if you recognize pain during sexual intercourse is normal, which is, I mean, that's been what's been said to you. So throughout your life, maybe to keep you away from sex, I don't know, but for what reason? Like, so it's all of a sudden, like, when you get the illness, all of a sudden you cannot change. I mean, it's a general perception of sexuality and menstrual health is the operational way that you are working. So that brings us to looking at menstrual health as a part of general health. Now, so we tend to dissociate. That's one reason, I believe. That's why the taboo is around as well. Menstrual health is there, the rest of the health is this side. So first, let's deal with the rest of the health, leave the menstrual health to people who want to get in trouble. Maybe. What do you think about it?
So we always prioritize issues, like even health issues or even like our basic needs. So most of the time, sexual reproductive health or menstrual health or things like that are not considered priorities. It's like there are other things to deal with, But I would say it's very difficult to prioritize something like that, because it's very individual, and how it affects is very different. And this is something that not only affects your physical health, but emotional health, mental health. So this needs a lot of it, like you said, multidisciplinary mental health support. You need like your exercises, you need your guidance and all that stuff. So having a holistic approach is like what we really need to look at, without like prioritizing this and that. And even when it comes to financing, this health issue gets more funding. Of course, it is reasonable, but then again, you can't just forget about these issues. Like I haven't heard a lot of people talking about endometriosis specifically. It's not something we hear. So. Yes. And there are long lines of women waiting to get treatment in Sri Lanka. I heard that fertility maybe. Yes. Yeah. So I also heard it's like the line that you have to wait to get treated for heart disease, especially in the government hospitals, and the cost could be. It could be really high. Some people sell their lands and jewelry to get but we didn't know these stories before. Like, even I didn't know these stories. So it's there's that pocket that's going on, while we also try to stigmatize and not talk about these things in one hand.
Yeah. So now sexual and menstrual health as a part of health, I really want to broaden it up a bit. I want to look at that the lifestyle where you look at sexuality and menstruation as a part of your life rather than a health issue. How would you jump in? That's I think not just the healthcare providers, the educators and other sectors, maybe administrators, even politicians. That's where they really have to come in, because I mean, you cannot take parts of your health and part of your well-being and say, okay, you are good with this, you're having absolutely nice mental health and physical health, or maybe even sexual health. Okay, fine. So but that part is not there with you. So I mean, except for you're 90% okay. So that's not how the body works. It's holistic, the entire body, if it is well, so it gives you the well-being. Yeah. So now looking at...
Sorry, Jill, just to come in there, it even affects your relationships. Now, when you ask a group of women, what are the or girls, what are the issues you mostly have, like most of the time women would say, ask issues around menstrual health or virginity or things like that. And then the first question is it okay to have sex when you have your menstruation?
Okay.
So because it's considered to be bad, painful. Of course, if it's painful, then there are certain things that the other party also needs to understand. And like, you know, how you communicate. Communication is key and all that. But there's nothing wrong in doing that when you have your menstruation, if you are comfortable and if you give consent. So that is, it has become relationship issues in many relationships when you actually hear the stories. So there's that angle as well.
Yeah, it's quite funny, right? It's like your issues are usually the issues are presented as a culture, as a personal issue, the cultural, social, personal issue, not as a health issue. Usually the people wait until you are having a fight with your husband, or maybe you are unable to go to work. So those are their concerns. So then they present with their problem. So we don't want women to wait until that. We want them to identify their health issues and then to come forward with that. So now that brings into this important factor of the men's role in menstrual health and endometriosis. Because now we live in a world where most of the policymakers, administrators, and even in the family, the decisions are being made by the father. So whether the kid goes to the school or not is dictated by him. So there are so many decisions that are being taken by the father. But when it comes to menstrual health, it's mostly the mother who sometimes hides it even from the father. I mean, the father even cannot buy the sanitary napkin from the supermarket. So it's basically a very women-centric thing. I think that is also another problem. Now that the inability for us to address the other 50% of the community. What do you think about it? Yes, how we can really improve on that, how we can really get them involved, get men involved. Rashani, you as well, and Deborah, you too. Yeah.
So in terms of, again, endometriosis, it's so important for your loved ones, men, women, girls, grandmothers, at every level to know your boss, your management. Yes, because the ramifications of having endometriosis, having possible debilitating pain or a more intangible symptom like severe chronic fatigue, right? You need to be able to objectively tell your loved ones, your family, or whoever, or your boss, or anybody that, okay, so this is a disease and I have these symptoms. So I'm unable to perform today, I'm unable to work today, and it needs to be objectively understood. There shouldn't be any stigma. I'm telling you, the more we talk about it, the more we can smash this stigma. And it has to, thing is, society consists of a man and woman, right? So both parties, there will be ramifications even for the man of the house or the office if he's not fully aware. Because then there is a lot of misunderstanding, right? And then it leaves a lot of ambiguity as to why she's behaving like this, because it can be a very isolating disease.
Right.
The more you tell, but the thing is, all these facts have to be factual, evidence-based, and also, I believe, socio-culturally sensitive.
Sensitive.
How we deliver message in the West is not how we can deliver message in Sri Lanka, right? I mean, that we have to be strategic.
Okay.
How now, when I speak about endometriosis to a Colombo school, say my school, it will be slightly different. I will be tweaking it a bit if I have to speak to a school, say, in the deep south or in the north.
Okay.
You have to be socio-culturally sensitive.
Yeah, Deborah, I think at now New Zealand, I want you to bring a bit of insights from New Zealand also. It's being culturally quite different society, looking at comprehensive sex education as well as sexuality in general more liberally. How can you contribute to this discussion?
Well, I absolutely agree with you. And I mean, you can go within just one city and find different, differences. And I hear what you're saying about, the North and what you might say is different in Sri Lanka than it might be in the West. There are some fundamental similarities and messages that are true to everybody. And then I think there is messages then that we have to take in, those cultural sensitivities and those little nuances that are particular to a particular area. And you'll be aware that we have our Māori women, Māori culture in New Zealand. It's very, very strong. So we are a culturally diverse country now, but with Māori as our Indigenous people. So when about 6 years ago, I was looking at this and I was thinking, when we were going into those very strong areas with a high dense Māori population, the Me program just wasn't quite fitting. So we've had to make quite big modifications to make sure, including having language, having we call it the kōrero, the talk, the speech, in actual Māori, in the language. So we flick between Māori and even our Pasifika. And South Auckland is a very big population of Pacific people. So you know, we all have to be aware of this. And if we just do a blind blanket, one size fits all, we've actually missed some very key concepts in what we're all trying to achieve.
It's not just a language, I feel. Like it's just, it's how view now, especially in Sinhalese and in Tamil, we have a limited lingo. We have limited technical words when it comes to menstrual health. Even like the words that are so, we use right now in this panel are so scientific. So we don't have lay terms. We don't have even slang to dignifiedly talk about menstrual health. So now, what do you think? I think it's a deficiency, and how we can overcome that, the lack of terminology.
Lack of terminology, especially in this area in local language, is a big issue. That is also why teachers or your parents can't talk about these issues, because your body parts, like kids are even parents are comfortable with like using nicknames and other different other things for body parts, or it's slang. So there's no in between. You don't use the technical terms. So saying the technical terms are really difficult in our local language. So the conversation does not happen in that way. So improving terminology and the skill to provide that information is important. But just because Deborah was also talking about this language issue and all that, I also wanted to bring in, like, we always talk about, like, we think of women and men, but we don't think of the non-binary genders. Sometimes we don't think of women and girls living with disabilities, women in women in prisons, women in girls in certified schools, like, environments like that. They also have the same needs. This is also a matter of dignity and their rights. So, so we definitely have to, when we look at solutions or when we look at healthcare provision or education or whatever, we need to look at these groups and have targeted approaches to give them information and access to products and services, because it's a basic human right.
No, obviously. So when it comes to access and affordability factor, now I feel it is something that should be subsidized, or at least given free. At the time, the discussion was whether to give, provide this. Obviously, the healthcare provision is free. The 70% of the healthcare provision when it comes to inpatient care in Sri Lanka is free, done in government sector. But sometimes there are limitations in the available services. 30% is only from the private sector, but it's slightly growing now. But when it comes to the menstrual health, it's basically, it's as you said, it's quite expensive. I mean, we we have to look at it at the opportunity cost as factor as well. So the cost altogether for those 5-6 days is quite high. So that could also be one reason why men and other parties don't really want to dive into this deep water, right? So rather you'll be safe. This is something, something that people have given up maybe. So that's something in Sri Lankan context. But I feel now regarding vulnerable communities, as you mentioned, right? So we have to really find out a modality, a mechanism of getting this information, especially to people with hearing disability, people with other vision disabilities. So whatever the comprehensive sex education or menstrual health, endometriosis awareness has to also come in that form. So are you providing your education and your social media engagement for vulnerable communities, or are you thinking of doing it in the future?
It's a very structured Sorry, I keep forgetting this. It's a very structured approach that we are taking. So, as I said, we look at grassroots level from schools to garment factories to corporates and even, the domestic front. So it's a very structured approach we have. You want me to just pause for a while?
No.
Okay. So the interesting thing is my foundation, the Endometriosis Support and Awareness Foundation, we ran a little survey. It was called No Endo, right? And in this No Endo survey, we interviewed and got some data from doctors and laymen. And we asked them, what are the challenges you have? Why is it that it's so difficult for people to come out with endometriosis from the layman's perspective? Why is it difficult for doctors to make definitive diagnosis? And then what they said was, even in places like government hospitals, sometimes patients would come and say, can you run a scan on me? Because I have abdominal pain and it goes back month to, but the doctors say, unfortunately, because of the lack of facilities, that they have to limit it, and sometimes there's a waiting period. So what they're saying is, at least if there are structured guidelines to guide them, then they can prioritize those scans.
There are structured guidelines to treat an individual.
Correct.
But are there structured guidelines to look at, the sourcing?
Correct.
Prioritizing your resources. That's your question.
Correct.
No? Right.
Prioritizing resources, like the technical aspect is so important, right? So the vulnerable groups again would be the less affluent, right, and the less informed party segments. So if, as I say, from law, if legislature can change this, it will make a huge difference. Guidelines to say, if they come in with these symptoms, prioritize, and of course enhance technical support, enhance the resources so that they can be pushed into further investigations.
But Deborah, in your experience, you said the Maori community, the indigenous community in New Zealand, what particular measures have the government have taken to improve their access and affordability for services with regard to endometriosis? What particular
Māori have a really big priority with the New Zealand government to across the, not just in health, but in education, in general rights. I think in general rights and on land and on water and access to services. And for instance, we've got a big campaign of the COVID vaccine at the moment, and millions and millions of dollars have been put into trying to encourage Māori to be vaccinated. So, with a health issue such as endometriosis, then we could focus actually on improving the health and well-being of Māori with endometriosis, and it would have a flow-on effect to the rest of the population, because that's just the focus of government is with Māori. And I think that we really try very hard to ensure that we have a bicultural sort of multicultural community, but a biculturalism with our Māori people too. It's it's embedded in us. It's part of our protocol, part of what we do.
Right. So it's basically what you're suggesting is to improving access to resources and prioritizing, giving them more resources, and providing acceptable methods and providing communication.
The trouble is, one of the problems, of course, is that Māori frequently don't present with symptoms as early as others might. So there's a lot of work to do within the families themselves, within this, within the social groups so that my understanding is that before colonization, Māori were very, very happy to be very open in talking about reproduction, menstruation, having babies, sexual intercourse, But once colonization came, they realized that that's when all the taboos came in. So we've got to undo that.
That is quite the case in Sri Lanka as well, I feel. Yeah, quite the case in Sri Lanka, because before the colonization, sexuality was something that people were liberal and also talked very
We
open.
celebrated. You know, we celebrated those things,
Yeah,
and then
yes, yeah.
then they unfortunately they learned for this to be shameful and and not talk about. So we've got to turn those attitudes and things around.
Yeah, I tell this with a bit of caution. That is, now even the celebration of the first monarchy in the Sri Lankan culture, even though in the current context we consider and also we feel as it is a celebratory thing, I mean, confining a person's sexuality. Okay, daughter, this is the time that you have to think about your, sexuality. This is a time that you should, stop thinking sexuality. But again, in the good old past, it was we were declaring. So they see and celebrating the reproductive capacity of a woman. How do you?
I mean, we still do in many contexts, and lots of people still do it. But there's a bit of hypocrisy there, because you celebrate that, but then after that it's all again shush, like you would have a party, invite people, there are lights and music, and then it has to be like, then you should be able to talk about it, like,
why not?
There are men and women,
we
uncles and aunties and grandfathers.
Everybody
everyone,
knows now. Yes.
But then after that, no one can talk about it. So
it's a quite oxymoron in that case. Yeah. Any experience?
When I attained age, I still remember, my little cousins would have to come and say happy birthday, and I'm like, my birthday is not today, and they know it. But that's because the older generation said, oh, it's her birthday. So it was that taboo at the time. So, but that's got to change.
Deborah, how is it over there in New Zealand? How is it being perceived, the first monarchy, and is it celebrated the way that we do?
I think in before colonization, I think it was absolutely celebrated. It was a wonderful thing to celebrate. This is our genealogy. This is our the future, that's life, and so that's the way it was looked upon. But of course now, it's just making sure that they can have as much pride and belief in there. We call that. I'm trying to think of the word in English. We call it whakapapa here, which is your ancestry, your where you come from, and so. Just to get back to that knowledge and to be really proud, and I think it's starting to happen. It is turning around, but we've certainly had to look at that in the Me program. And I take on board what you said too, Sarah, about diversity, because we've also had to look at that with them, cast that lens right over the program. This is what Otago University are doing to make sure that it fits. Or anybody really who is watching it can be fitting for them and personal to them. So it's got to be place-based, it's got to be personalized, and it's got to be agile to fit in lots of places. So that doesn't mean just going in and telling a bad story about your period to a group of students.
So we have got few questions just to wrap up the session today. Rashani, this is for you. This is to you. Rashani, in your experience, do you find that people have generally been understanding when you've explained your condition?
Unfortunately,
no.
Sorry, I keep forgetting the mic. Unfortunately, no, it's not the case. I mean, people do try to understand, but in all fairness, when you say, I'm not fit to come today, or I'm not fit to reply your text, it took a long time before I was able to clearly tell them why, because even I wasn't sure what was going on. So since it is a little confusing overall, the symptoms, those intangible symptoms, not so much your pelvic cramps, but your fatigue, your anxiety, all those little body shivers and the tremors, brain fog, it's a little difficult for people, even your closest circle, to understand. So I would say the answer is no.
So this question is to Sarah. Sarah, at what point that we should start talking about menstrual health and menstruation?
I mean,
in the lifetime, in the lifespan, at what stage of life that you should start?
I mean, the age of first menarche has changed nowadays. It's quite young. So
the 11 years,
So I think you
maybe.
have to start it quite early because there are kids who are in grade 2, 3 who get their first period. So it's like, that's why you need age appropriate sexuality education where grade 1, 2, 3, you can talk about your body, cleanliness, good touch, bad touch, and a little bit about what to look out for kind of thing. You know, you can start the conversation there, but it should start early.
Yeah. I should say now we have had such a colorful and vivid experience sharing, and as well as putting up scientific evidence, and also we've had differences in opinion and perspectives. I think this was a very rich discussion, and we've got several more questions from the audience. Unfortunately, we've run out of time, and we're quite limited with that. So therefore, let me wrap up the session. Let me thank our panelists, Deborah, Sarah, and Shani for joining us, and also our audience for sticking to us. I mean, so many have been, the retention has been so good. And so let me give the mic to the compere. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I just encourage everyone to talk about it, period.
Thank you, Dr. Gunasekara. For the closing remarks, I would like to invite Ms. Sharika Kure. Ms. Sharika Kure is at present the officer in charge of United Nations Population Fund. She is the National Program and Policy Analyst for Women's Rights, Gender and the Humanitarian Focal Point for the country office. She leads the gender program in line with UNFPA's strategic priorities globally to end gender-based violence and harmful practices. She's very passionate about the work she does in advocating for a violence-free world for women and girls.
Thank you. I think I'm audible, right? Yes. So good evening, everybody, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, guests, and Dr. Deborah, and all the panelists. Thank you so much for spending so much of your Friday evening at this panel. So it is with great pleasure and privilege that I thank all of you, the panelists, and as well as all those who have been participating in this discussion. This discussion is extremely important, I think. As an endometriosis survivor myself, I can relate to a lot of what the panelists were speaking about and what the doctors have been speaking about, because there was a lot of misdiagnosis as well, and also the fact of lack of awareness of the fact really makes you not know what is going on, and at a young age you really don't know what is happening. So I can really relate to what was spoken by the panel. So first and foremost, thank you so much for the Endometriosis Association of Sri Lanka for joining hands with UNFPA yet again to generate this much needed discussion and the broader context, and in the broader context of sexual reproductive health and rights. I'm sure that you will all agree with me that this is an illuminating discussion which highlighted the gaps where we need to address with regards to women's and girls' reproductive health and how we need to do that. So to our speakers who shared the experience, you are truly endo survivors. Thank you for speaking so strongly on your journey, which I'm sure inspired everyone present here, and more important, created awareness on the issue, which we hope to continue to do so as UNFPA. So your journey is unique, I think, to everyone who has shared their their thoughts on this issue. But there is much more that we need to do, like all the panelists has stated. So one is we need to ensure that we break the taboo in speaking about it, not only within the communities ourselves, but also with the medical practitioners on creating awareness amongst them, or encouraging them to speak to this about their patients. Because even when I went first, I was also told I had chocolate cysts as well. And that was also alarming to know really what it was and really why the reason was for it. So how we actually have the medical practitioners understanding what it is, and to address, of course, the myths and misconceptions that prevent women and girls accessing the medical help they need, to ensure medical help is also affordable. You know, most women in the rural areas may be suffering these symptoms without any understanding of what this is and what the cure is and what can support them in future as well. So it's really important that this is addressed. So ultimately, of course, as we all know, to ensure that all women's rights and choices are respected. So as UNFPA, we are committed to ensuring women and girls have uninterrupted access to reproductive health needs and services, especially during COVID-19 pandemic. So we have also supported in providing hygiene kits with the basic sanitary napkins, soap, sanitizers, etc. And like Sarah highlighted, we also provide in emergencies these dignity kits, which are also with the needs, catered to the needs of women and girls, with sanitary napkins, disposable underwear, all of these things that would preserve their dignity. But there is much more that we need to do as a nation and as also medical practitioners, and also as a community. So we look forward to continuing our work with the Endometriosis Society and many other government and non-government stakeholders to better amplify this message on endometriosis and even beyond. I also forgot to thank one important person, that's Professor Hemanta Senanayake, I think, who leads on this and who's been an integral partner of UNFPA in this journey of us. So we are glad to be part of it and encouraging more open dialogue on this topic. Have a pleasant evening and thank you to everyone. Over.